Okay. Okay. Well, what did you might say?
You're red.
Oh. Sorry. Okay, so the out of Groton Planning and Zoning Commission special meeting is called to order, and first roll call. Hal
Here.
and Michael
Here.
and Steve
Here.
and Kevin.
Here.
Great, okay. Thanks for coming. And now, next is public communications. Public communication.
No, there are no public communications on this agenda.
Great. Well, okay, it was written only, but I didn't know if we got anything. Okay, thanks. Now, new business. 2021, 2023 housing market studies. So we have a presentation by Tom Doretsky, Moines Associates. Great. Go ahead.
All right, and before,
Unless you want to.
yes, thanks, everybody. Thanks again for coming tonight. So just kind of a little perspective on things and where we are. So purpose of tonight, we had questions from the commission over the past few months of looking for a little bit of a refresher and trying to understand the inputs and how we got to some of the numbers in the 2021 and 2023 housing market analyses. And Tom and his firm Moines had done those studies for us. So tonight he was going to talk a little bit about some of the inputs, how they came up with those numbers, and then also talk a little bit about some of the things that are changing in the future. And there'll be a future study that's completed in the near future that we'll talk about at a later meeting. But we really wanted to give a deep dive into those two studies. Also, in Tom's presentation tonight, every few slides, he'll have basically a question slide. So he'll go through a couple or a few and then stop for questions. So as people have things that are come up, if you want to just kind of write yourself a quick note, and we'll kind of get back to that. And we also have some other folks from Barrett Consulting, from Horsley Witten on the call tonight. So if things come up, we want to give you that opportunity. And then we do have a hard stop tonight at 6:30. Just there's another planning and zoning commission meeting after this and a council meeting I got to run off to. But with that,
Could I ask one question?
yes.
So we're given what we support, a 5-6 page document, right?
That's for next Monday.
That's for next month.
Yes.
Got it. Just wanted to say
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. So tonight we're talking about
Yeah.
housing, again, the 21, the 23 studies, the inputs for those, and a little bit of kind of what's also happening in current day.
Yeah. Got it.
Great.
With that, I'll hand it over to Tom.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And can you see my slides?
Yes.
And just so you know, Tom, they have printed out copies of your slides as well, so they can take notes if they need to.
Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Tom Doretsky. I'm Vice President and Director of Research at Moines Associates. I've been at Moines for about 11 years. We're a national economic development firm. For those that aren't familiar with us, we've got a strong New England footprint. We've worked with the town of Groton on various housing and economic initiatives over the years. Thanks for having me here tonight. As John said, I'm here to walk you through the housing demand analyses that were completed in 2021 and 2023. Focusing on methodologies, inputs, assumptions, and what the data is telling us about housing needs. So we'll also start talking about, after we go through those kind of 21 and 23 studies, we'll talk about how market and demographic trends have shifted since those prior studies and kind of set us up for the new study that will be coming out. And kind of what that means for planning related to the housing goals going forward. So my goal for tonight is hopefully to give you a clear data-driven understanding of the trends shaping the housing market, and kind of leave you with a better understanding so that you can make informed decisions. Here's a roadmap for this evening. Start with just kind of a recap of the purpose of housing demand analysis. Look at kind of what the prior results were from the two studies. Then we'll do a dive into the methodology for each study. Then we'll move into recent demographic and market trends, and then next steps. And As John mentioned, as we go through the presentation, I have stopping points kind of built in, so we'll give you lots of opportunities to ask questions. So the purpose of demand analysis. So the purpose of demand analysis is not to dictate what Groton has to do or must do. It's to provide an objective baseline and kind of an order of magnitude understanding of what housing demand potential is in the town. So we want to show what future housing needs are when we look at population and age groups and households and how they're shifting over time. We want to understand that so that we can ensure that the community has the kinds of housing that those populations will need. It identifies gaps between existing housing and resident needs. So for example, maybe we have plenty of large single-family homes in town, but fewer options for seniors downsizing or younger families entering the market. It provides an objective baseline for discussion and planning. So this kind of gives us a common set of numbers to work from, so we're not relying on kind of guesswork when making decisions. Next, it highlights opportunities and not mandates or quotas. So this analysis isn't saying we have to build a certain number of homes. It's just showing what the market could support if the community chooses to allow it. It helps align zoning, infrastructure, and policy with likely demand. So if we know demand is growing for certain housing types, we can look at whether zoning and infrastructure are supporting that type of development or whether they're blocking it. And then finally, supporting informed decisions about growth in a way that reflects your priorities. So how to interpret housing demand projections. One important thing I want to stress is kind of how to think about these projections. When we say the analysis shows potential for a certain number of units, that doesn't mean that those units will definitely be built or that the town has to build them. It's not a forecast of construction either. It's really a measure of market capacity. So in other words, if the right conditions are in place, the market could reasonably support this amount of housing over the next decade. And so there's a lot of factors that go into whether housing development actually occurs or not beyond market feasibility or market demand. That's one of the requirements, but there are also things like financial feasibility. Are the rents and the sales prices that a housing builder could charge, are they enough to cover the costs of construction and financing and incentivize a developer to build? Infrastructure capacity, certainly having water, sewer, transportation systems that can support. Zoning and regulatory, do the land use rules allow the types of housing? And then market timing and investor interest. Are developers confident that demand will be there when the projects deliver or come to market? So these demand numbers should really be understood as showing the capacity of the market. They highlight that demand exists in the community, but it's obviously up to local decisions and policies and market conditions to determine how much of that demand is going to be satisfied. So, the town's role here is to decide whether to unlock that potential over the next 10 years. It doesn't mean committing to every single unit. It's understanding that the need exists and understanding that private developers are going to do their own market analysis to determine whether individual projects will be viable. They want to know that the specific housing product that they're thinking about delivering is going to be viable, and certainly they want to make money on that. So they're going to make sure that the demand is realistic for these different types of housing choices. Okay, so jumping into the studies themselves. So let's start with the 2021 study. This was kind of the town's first major look at housing demand in this way. So that analysis identified a potential demand for about 5,260 units in Groton over the 10-year period beginning in 2021 through the end of 2030. And the drivers of demand came from several key groups. So new electric boat workers, with hiring expected to bring many new employees to the region. Rental upgraders, which are people already living here who could afford to move into newer or higher quality housing if it were available. commuters, who are people working in Groton but living outside the town who might move here if the right housing existed, new workers in the broader region. So these might be connected to electric boat through economic multiplier effects, as well as Navy families, and we'll talk about these folks. And then finally, households in obsolete housing or housing that's at risk of becoming obsolete, where older units kind of naturally need to be replaced. So one of the important points from the 20.
Just one question. When can we ask questions? When did you want us to?
Next page.
Next
Yep.
page? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. I'll hold on.
So one of the most important points from 2021 was that electric boat was the largest driver of new demand. The assumptions at the time were that EB would add about 2,000 new jobs and make about 15,000 hires through 2030, with a majority of those hires coming from outside the region. And so that produced demand for thousands of new households across southeastern Connecticut, with Groton capturing a portion of that if the right housing were available. So the study made it clear that EB's trajectory, along with these other components of demand, would kind of set the stage for housing pressure in Groton. So that was kind of the baseline we're working from. So yeah, let's pause here for questions.
Go, Sue.
I was gonna say, if anybody else wants to jump in. Okay. Could you explain what it means to be living in an obsolete unit? I just don't understand that concept, and what would happen to your house if you're living in there and somebody knocks on your door and says, oh, by the way, you're in an obsolete unit. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so this is referring to units that are at risk of becoming obsolete over the period that we're looking at into the future. So these are homes that likely need significant renovation. Systems are failing, just not in good shape, haven't been kept up. So these units would either need to be significantly rehabbed or completely replaced. So, looking at some of the data, there are not a large number, but some number of units that are considered substandard, that don't have, adequate plumbing systems. Again, not a large number, but they do kind of exist in town. And then there are others of that 260 that, are at risk of becoming substandard, or not, likely not, the type of unit that someone should be living in for safety reasons.
Well, what's the source of your data on that, though? I mean, how do you know? Because, I think doing most of my life in various houses, I only know I have a problem. It's like a last minute thing in a it's not like somebody can then say, oh, you have an obsolete house or something. So I don't understand how they're getting the data, because everybody has problems with their house, I think, just about, but. Okay.
Right. I mean, these are homes that are in poor condition. These aren't, your water heater needs to be replaced. So this is based on both local data on substandard units, but also kind of national averages, given the age of the housing stock in the community, of replacement demand. So on average, about 0.3% of the national housing stock is replaced each year for that reason.
Oh, okay. That's where you're getting this from. Right.
And then, also literally 3-4 times a year, we have situations in town with hoarders or houses that are so blighted, they need to be condemned, they're knocked down. Also, probably what falls into this category are houses that are completely gutted because of just lack of maintenance and deterioration. So, again, as Tom said, it's not just replacing your water heater or your HVAC system. It's buildings that may have been built a long time ago, or they've just been, due to whatever number of factors, seriously neglected from a maintenance perspective for a period of time. And sometimes it only takes a few years to watch a house go drastically downhill.
This is true.
And-
Yes.
And 0.3% isn't.
I believe
Big-
Tom's gonna go over the specific assumptions attributed to each of the studies too,
Okay.
so where those numbers are coming from.
Okay. well,
Yeah, because I had a similar question about, how do you determine rental upgraders? I mean, that's
Yep.
It's like a
Yeah,
very-
so we're gonna go through each of these segments in
okay.
detail.
That-
So
that
this is just to kind of recap the overall findings of each study, and then we're gonna go through each group for each study in detail. So we'll
Okay,
get.
can I ask a question just because it's not where you got the number from? This is more of a how the total numbers add up for the like the rental upgrades.
Sure.
Upgrader. I'm okay with the number, but since these are people who already live here and want a better place, that means when these 1,800 people move, they have freed up 1,800 okay units. Is that factored into the numbers?
Yeah, so that's a good point, right? So this is looking at kind of regionally folks that are potentially would be interested in rental upgraders or upgrading the rental unit. About 10% of renters move each year on average. So this would be looking at kind of that subset of people that might look to be moving each year and be interested in rental upgraders. So yes, if all of these people were to move all at the same time, that could create empty units in other places that would have to be backfilled by other folks and those sorts of things. But this is kind of looking at overall kind of what is the segment of that group looking for, and does Groton have an opportunity to potentially capture some, probably not all, but some of these folks to better meet their housing needs.
So-
There's the assumption of like a one-to-one rental upgrader too, right?
Right.
So maybe if you're upgrading, right, there's a possibility that there's two people in the unit, right? Sharing a unit, sharing a rent, making more money. Now it's one person, so you're splitting.
But that's an assumption.
Okay.
right?
No,
But-
that's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
The 5,200 includes that 1,800.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
Is
th-
the
these
question.
rental upgraders, well, it's regional, so maybe it all doesn't apply, but even in the region, those people are already here living in a place and they move out
Mhm.
over 10 years. So every year, 180 people get a better place, ideally, or want to. That frees up 180 apartments every year. Is that factored into here, or is that sort of, or is it not?
In that those people are captured in that 5,260 unit total. So the point here is not necessarily that if we built 5,200 units overnight, there would be a lot of units unoccupied. But this is over a 10-year period, so that kind of factors in the fact that these people, over time, that demand could be soaked up.
Oh, but I just don't see that. I don't see this analysis working like that.
But if we listen to the methodology,
Uh,
maybe we'll get it.
No, I don't.
Because
Yeah.
that's why I have two questions. So I'd love to hear the methodology. Hopefully that will drive our understanding.
So again, this slide was a recap.
Yeah.
He's going to get into the methodology of each one of these items in further slides.
Okay, because it's like the incoming commuters, not everybody comes here and knocks on the door and stay here. It was 80-some%.
It's
don't come.
82%.
Yeah. don't
Correct.
come too. So I took all these things and, massaged them, and I was coming up with about 1,000. Net, but this is like a today look. It's not a 10-year look.
This is a 10-year.
I know, I understand.
Yes.
that, yeah.
And
So-
again, if we,
Yeah.
so there's 82% of our workforce, which are commuters. Our workforce is approximately 27,000. We're not saying we want to collect all 80
Understand.
because then we'd need 20,
Yep.
a population increase of 27,000. Who knows how many new units, households or formations that would be. Some of it would be family, some of it would not. We're not looking for that level of displacement. So
Right.
again,
Yep, okay. Can I? No, I guess just the last thing. I'd heard from, I think, a pretty good source that the turnover at Electric Boat was really substantial because they do hire, and I'm talking to the expert, right? Wait, you left. But a lot of people go there to get training, it's part of their whole career and all that. But then they leave, and of course, they get a good job somewhere else and all that. So I want to make sure we have a net increase here, not just on new hires, as it were, so.
Yes, so we'll discuss that in a second.
Okay, great, thanks.
yeah. And again, when we look at jobs for EB, we look generally at that net of new jobs, not total new hires, because the new hires, the number is astronomical.
Sure.
But that's also people retire, people decide to leave, people get fired. It's a much bigger number when you look at how many new hires there are each year. It's a much bigger number.
Yeah, the attrition, I think somewhere around 10%.
Yes.
And when you're talking about 18,000 plus people.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so a lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one number.
Well,
And then
since
the,
I left, it probably skyrocketed.
That's true.
yeah, so there's the attrition number and then there's the new jobs number. Those are kind of looked at as two different pieces.
which they dropped this past year.
Yeah.
My one question was this overall number, the 6,450 is to meet existing demand, but we're not talking about a surplus because I think part of the conversation that's being had in the zeitgeist is what's the amount needed to stagnate or drop prices with an oversupply. So we're just talking about meeting existing demand. We're not talking about an oversupply that would then affect actual rental prices.
I don't think it's existing.
We're talking about future demand in
Future demand.
2030. So
Okay,
this is,
future
so
demand,
we don't,
but
if we
not
built all
oversupply.
those today, they would not be filled. But we're talking about a 10-year period over which these would be, absorbed into the market.
So when we're looking at this one slide here, this is talking about the 2021 study. This was the first study that we had done along these lines. 5,260 10-year housing unit potential.
Right.
So from 2021 to 2031.
So we're not talking about oversupply.
We're not talking about oversupply. We're
Thank
looking at the potential demand of units over that 10-year period. Yeah, because I think we all know there's no way we could build 5,200 units in a year or two or even three.
Unless we go up.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, as we've seen with the amount you've approved recently,
Yep.
you're still
Not built.
not built.
That's
Until
what's-
hammers are swinging and COs are issued, those units don't matter a whole lot.
It's kind of a sad story. There's so many that were approved and then but that's, I know how things go.
It's financing, it's tariffs, it's construction, it's labor, it's a whole lot of things.
It'll take longer.
Yeah. Anyway, Tom, back to you.
Yeah, and the other just important caveat I would say when we're thinking about this demand, this is demand if the units can be delivered at price points that are within people's price range. So that's a big if too. The market has to be able to make money on delivering those. So assuming that developers can build housing at rates that align with people's incomes, this is the demand potential. If they can't, because the numbers don't pencil out, we're not going to see this level of development happening without, subsidy or programs to kind of close any kind of funding gap. Okay, so recap of 2023 here. So two years later, 2023, numbers shifted. This time potential demand rose to 6,450 units. That's an increase of about 1,200 over the 2021 findings. So breaking that down, new EB workers accounted for about 2,700 units. That change was tied directly to EB's updated hiring projections, which anticipated 20,000 hires through 2030 or 2,500 net new jobs through 2030.
Again, these are 2023 numbers and projections, so don't think about today recapping that study.
So this is right. Rental upgrader demand ticked up slightly. That was just based on having kind of a slightly larger rental pool. Incoming commuter demand stayed unchanged. New workers in the region went from 300 to 320, so relatively stable. And then this obsolete unit need, the prior analysis was only looking at a 5-year period, so that was a slight oversight. So the 545 extends it over a 10-year period. That's why that went up so significantly. Okay, so the picture in 2023 was a community with growing housing pressures. EB was responsible for about 2/3 of the increase since the 2021 study, but every other source of demand was either also growing or holding steady. So the big message here is that the housing challenge, wasn't limited to one group. EB was a driver, but the analysis kind of showed broad-based demand across all of these different groups in the 2023 study. So any questions on that before we dive into the individual segments?
I guess a general question. New London just built a significant number of units. And it's right next to where EB New London is.
Mhm.
So when we talk about any of these studies, are we putting the fence up right around Groton?
So, no, we're not putting some of these studies were looking specifically at Groton, but one of the questions that after we did these two studies and, kind of taking a step back, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've never worked in a community before where we had this level of detail. This is the kind of the best information that we can get with available data. Yes, it's a little bit of we're taking projections based on best available data, kind of past practice, hiring, et cetera. But because we have such great big employers here, it's actually a lot easier for us to project out some of the stuff, especially with how subs are built. So we're lucky to have this kind of high level specific data on housing market needs. With that said, after we did these studies, we got a lot of questions from people of, well, what if we don't want any of it? Why doesn't New London build it or Ledyard or somewhere else? Can it go there instead? So as part of the missing middle housing project that we're doing, when we asked the DOD for some money, we put into that, we don't want to look at just Groton. We want to look at the region. So the study that Camoin is working on now will be looking at updating these numbers for Groton, but also looking at the larger kind of region, not the entire commuting area, but municipalities that are adjacent or that have an influence on our market.
Yeah.
So we'll be coming soon.
Okay, but
Yeah.
related question though, which I think is important, especially for EB, is that EB, constitutes EB Groton, EB New London, and EB Quonset Point.
Correct.
So when they do, I need 2,600 more people, is that EB Groton or is that all three entities?
We will peel that data out of looking at, we definitely take out North Kingstown. We're not looking at Quonset.
Well, that's huge. I mean, you saw what they built there.
Oh, yeah, but as far as from new people here, we're not saying that, we're not counting jobs at Quonset Point as part of Groton jobs.
So the hiring that EB's talking about is just hiring in Groton.
When we looking at these numbers, I believe so, that we're just looking at the
Okay.
Groton numbers, and that's
It's
something,
a big deal because Quonset Point is where the haps are happening. now.
yes.
We're not capturing Quonset Point workers, right, in the hiring practices. That's not built into, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, any of these past studies or the future study.
Right, so as I go through this, I'll specify what's for EB as a whole versus southeastern Connecticut. The numbers I've stated so far are specific to southeastern Connecticut, so Groton, New London.
Yep.
And are you getting this data directly from Electric Boat, the split out between New London versus Groton anticipated hires?
Yes, so this is what they told us at the time of these studies.
There actually was a note that you had in this somewhere, when I glanced through, that kind of said that they're already staffed fully at the other places. So when they're talking about how much they're hiring, that's why your numbers were, all that's left to staff is Groton.
Is Groton.
Yeah, whenever we go to presentations or get information from EB about hiring, we're always focused on, all right, what's the Groton impact?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Quantum points ways.
Yes, yep,
I'm sure they live closer, hopefully.
yes. All right, any other questions at this point? All right,
EB page now.
yeah, here you go.
It's your nights.
Okay, so now we're gonna dive into each demand segment here. So Electric Boat, so we're back to the 2021 study now. EB anticipated adding about 2,000 net new jobs in southeastern Connecticut by 2030. To make that possible at the time, they expected to hire a total of 15,000 people. And the reason that number was so high because they also needed to replace roughly 13,000 retiring workers during that period. So that's what they told us at the time. So the hiring challenge wasn't just about growth, it was also about kind of backfilling positions. Every time a worker retired, EB had to bring in someone new. And when we talked to them in 2021, their assumption was that many of those replacements were assumed to come from outside the region, so adding to the number of new households moving here. This also kind of the study makes an adjustment to account for homes that would open up as retirees moved out of Groton, a certain share of those kind of based on census migration data of kind of the typical outflow of retirees. So that was kind of accounted for in the study. And then the other ripple effect that kind of is captured here is that EB hiring wasn't only pulling in people from outside southeastern Connecticut, but also drawing from some within the region, the folks that they could hire from the region. A portion of those workers or those new EB hires would be leaving their existing jobs in the region. Maybe they were underemployed or in lower paying positions, so kind of shifting jobs. And then when they moved into EB jobs, the positions that they left would need to be filled as well. And so this was all kind of developed through conversations with EB, but this is kind of thing is inexact, certainly inexact, but the study estimated that about 25% of those vacated jobs would ultimately require workers from outside the region. So the underlying assumption for all of this is that kind of the jobs or employment kind of region wide would hold steady, and then on that baseline EB hires would be on top of that. So like all net new jobs to the region for EB. So that's kind of underlying this assumption with a lot of new workers having to be hired from outside the region and driving demand there. So when we add it all up, it's not just that direct EB growth, but kind of the chain reaction of backfilling across the broader labor market. So that was kind of a regional look. Then we looked at what Groton's share of that capture could reasonably be. So under a kind of a status quo scenario, Groton's share of the regional housing stock, if we assumed that Groton captured a segment of those new movers or new hires into EB at the rate that Groton currently makes up of the overall regional housing stock, that would be somewhere in the 12 to 15% range of new households. And then both from EB hires and also kind of the need to backfill other jobs in the region. However, but because Groton holds more of the region's jobs than homes, the Groton accounts for about 20% of the region's jobs, and clearly that's where a lot of the EB jobs are based. A strong case could be made for a kind of a higher capture. Groton would be kind of capturing an outsized number of those new residents moving into the region. So that was kind of an attainable capture rate that we put at 35%. So again, these would be people like young welders and tradespeople moving in, maybe with a partner looking for an apartment near work. Others might be mid-career engineers or managers moving in with their families, looking for, a good school district. Still others replacement hires for other jobs that EB hires are vacating throughout the region. So, this wasn't the key takeaway here is that the assumption for this study was that EB hiring wasn't about just new jobs. It was anticipated new jobs at EB, it was anticipated that this would kind of set in motion workforce turnover, and kind of a significant increase in the number of workers needed in the region, especially with all that retirement happening. A lot of the retirees aren't necessarily leaving the region, but they're no longer in the workforce. So new folks are going to need to come in to fill those jobs.
You have an estimate on how many of the 13,000 or how many of the people that are retiring from EB, actually, how many of them are leaving their houses, maybe going to Florida? Maybe that was the old days, but
Yes, that
know,
was
yeah,
somewhere
that
in,
would do the
I think that
housing.
was in a footnote of the study of what we assumed.
Okay.
I don't
Now-
have it on me right now, but I can get
No,
that
that's okay.
number.
And also, I think you have to assume that of those 13,000 jobs, 82% of them didn't live here as well.
Right, that's what I was doing. Right.
And so you get to the 1,900 by adding up the two green boxes,
Right.
1911, right? Okay.
Okay, so that was the electric boat workers. Next, the rental upgraders. So we talked about these a bit before. These are folks already living in the region who are renting, but who could afford, if they could afford to move into newer, higher quality housing if it was available and they wanted to do so. So this segment's also important because it means that it could free up more moderately priced rental stock for more moderate income households. If that there was room to upgrade, that means folks could backfill the stock that they vacated, and it might align better with moderate income households, allow folks that maybe are doubling up in households or living with their parents, other kind of situations like that, freeing up that kind of lower moderate price range housing to accommodate their needs. So at this time in 2021, about 42% of renters in the region were spending less than 25% of their income on rent. So 30% is the usual threshold that is used to determine, if you're below 30%, then you're comfortably affording your housing. So about 42% were less than 25%. So we added a little buffer in there. 10% of renters move each year, according to the census data. So when you put those numbers together, it worked out to around 1,800 renter households each year in the region had the financial capacity to upgrade, or about 18,000 over 10 years. And then applying Groton's share of the regional housing market of 12%, that translated to about 1,800 units of demand in Groton. Roughly. And then there was a small adjustment made to avoid double counting of in-commuters, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And so, again, these are residents who could choose Groton if the right housing options were there. So that could be, someone renting an older 2-bedroom now, but they want to move into a new apartment with updated amenities. Young professionals with steady jobs, tired of outdated units. Those types of populations that might be interested if more, higher quality options were available.
Okay, I just have one question, actually more for John and Tim. And Bryce, do we really have that kind of rental housing available? If somebody said, oh, I want a balcony, I want this, I want a better kitchen. I mean, do we have that option now? And I was just, do we have very much? I'm just not familiar with it.
Yeah, and I think and that's also what people are now trying to build is
Okay.
they realize that there's a demand out there, and we have stuff that does exist now. That's really nice. We have stuff at all different price points. And, one of the other things that happens as part of this is when you have vacancies, that's also a time where units then get upgraded sometimes. Sometimes they don't get upgraded.
Yep.
And, we've seen, I think over the past few years through some of our approvals, whether it's hotels that are being converted to apartments, things that are being built at different price points. But again, as the demand is there, we're going to see stuff starting to get built. I think there was kind of for a number of years through the kind of 2010s, there wasn't a lot of moving in the market and not a lot was being approved or constructed. And I think that helped add to that backflow of what's needed.
Tom, how, I can understand what you just, the people who want to upgrade.
Mhm.
How do we account for the 35% of the population that absolutely can't afford to live where they are? And what happens to them? Where do they go?
Yeah, absolutely right. So those folks are certainly at risk of losing their housing options. So that speaks to a need for housing, capital A affordable housing that that can accommodate them, or other programs to keep people in their homes. So that doesn't necessarily mean while they exist, they currently have a housing unit. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to build 15,000 more units to accommodate these folks. However, that's certainly an important piece of the market. And by some of this, allowing some of this kind of new housing to go up, that could free up some of the more affordable existing kind of naturally affordable housing stock that folks that are well below their threshold are currently living in. That could take some pressure off kind of those highly cost burdened folks. But that's certainly a concern and a need.
I'm just trying to imagine then, as these people upgrade, would the ones who are not able to afford it then move into these lesser?
Yeah,
units?
right. So that
Or
could
move
certainly
out of
happen.
the area, right?
Right, exactly. Right. They could be
Okay.
completely priced out of the area, but it could be that, some of that housing kind of filters down and
Yeah.
they're able to secure a more affordable unit.
Okay.
Yeah, true story. Starting at EB, nobody had enough money for a house.
Yeah.
Barely had enough money for an apartment. So 3 or 4 guys get together,
Yeah.
they rent a place, they rent half a duplex or something like that. You take roommates on, it's not like you're on the street. It's just that you're not, living by yourself in a house. There's many ways to skin that cat. Related question, just on the rental upgrades. On the original slide you showed with the recap, you were talking about a 10-year window and 1,800 upgrades. Now you're referring to a 1,800 annual upgrade?
No, this is overall. So this is over the 10-year period. So this is the
Your
the
assumption,
18,000,
your
the
assumption
18,
says annually.
Yeah.
right. So that's regionally. There's 19,100 potential renter upgraders regionally. 10% of those move each year. That's how you get to the 1,800. Then 18,000 is the demand over that 10-year period. Groton's capture of that is 12% based on their kind of current housing share.
So there's those two tables on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Table on the left, the bolded number, that 18,000 shows that regional upgrade demand over that 10-year period, whereas the bolded net Groton capture on the right shows the same demand just for Groton over the 10-year period.
Okay.
So if I could, I'm sorry if I missed it. I know I walked in a couple minutes late. Did we bound what we're calling regional? Are we talking about southeastern Connecticut, Connecticut and Massachusetts and Rhode Island? Like what's our region that we're comparing against?
Yeah, good question. So in the study, there is a map that shows it, but it's roughly New London County, a few towns on the Rhode Island side, including Westerly, and then a few towns along the coast to the west. But it is primarily New London County
Waterford?
with a few extra towns.
It's basically, yeah, like
To the Essex or to the Connecticut River?
I don't know how far
Not that
west. I
far.
don't think it goes that far west.
It was
I can't tell you. if I
like the
know
commute distance, basically.
Yeah.
Okay,
Map is in one of the studies.
so like a 45-minute kind of drive radius.
Essentially,
Okay.
Yeah, roughly it was kind of put together by looking at where the majority of Groton commuters live.
And then my next question was just on this 42, 58% split between people potentially ready to upgrade and those who are just absolutely unable to move from where they're at and they still can't afford it. Is that nationally representative, or is this like a particular issue for our region that we're looking at?
I don't have the exact numbers nationally, but I think that spread kind of over the income categories is fairly representative. I mean, Groton falls in on a national scale, falls kind of near the middle in terms of affordability, when looking at the US as a whole. So there's some metros that are much less affordable, much more cost burden, places like New York or Boston, and then other areas that are less so. But Groton's probably close to, representing kind of the US overall average, just given its kind of market characteristics.
Thank you.
Also, I think if you look at the study, I think it actually gets into breaking out US, Connecticut, Groton on a lot of this kind of household and income data.
Were there any like specific peer municipalities that were looked at? With like the same like demographic makeup, income makeup, industry makeup?
So I think in the new 2025 study, we're looking at some similar municipalities.
I don't think on the dimension of cost burdens though, specifically
Well,
cost
sure, but
burdens, just I think overall.
Cross
costs.
housing.
Yeah, yeah.
I believe there's a section of the 2021 report called benchmark communities or something like that that goes into that.
I guess one point on the renter household spending of income, the people are in the 35%. They aren't necessarily, living in poverty. They've just chosen to live in a nice place. That may be their first place out of whatever, grad school. And I don't think you get a good picture there of if there's any real problems or not. I mean, some people can live 50% of their net income for rent and they still do okay. So
Yes, right. The underlying income of those folks is important. When you look at the data broken out by income level, you see that a large portion of those 35% or more are at the lower end of that spectrum. But there are some folks, as you mentioned, that are kind of, living a little bit above their means by choice because they, choose to do that.
Again, if you dive into some of the more specific data on these studies, and I think even some of the stuff with the POCD, you'll see that it tells the story that Tom was talking about. There might be a small segment of the population that's enjoying living above their means, but there's also a lot of people that we hear from quite often about they're barely able to hold on to where they're living. Neighborhoods are being displaced as they get bought up by investors, get improved, and then people are getting priced out. So it's not just, 4 new EB workers that are piling into a duplex and, hotbedding the place and enjoying going out on the town every night. Some of this is families, it's people struggling. There's other pieces to the puzzle.
no, I agree. I think that's absolutely true. I think prices have really gone up,
Yeah.
maybe the last decade or so, housing, rentals and everything.
What came out of the state's fair share kind of estimates too, that was part of that larger housing bill that estimated the need of affordable units. So those that are experiencing cost burdens and need that subsidized affordability, which that's providing a more granular look at the specific kinds of housing that some people in Groton need amongst other communities.
Okay. Next up, we've got incoming commuters. So this is people who work in Groton but live somewhere else. At the time of the study, about 82% of people who worked in Groton were commuting in from outside. That meant over 21,000 workers had jobs in town but lived elsewhere. So the analysis assumed that if the right types of housing were available, 5% of those in-commuters might choose to move into Groton. And again, this is just kind of based on what might be a reasonable assumption. That 5% felt like a low enough number that, feels within the realm of possibility if housing types were available at the right price points. that kind of share of commuters might be interested. So assuming that that did happen, if 5% of in-commuters move to Groton, that means that the kind of that future commuter rate would come down to 76.6% or so, which would be at the lower end of some of those kind of comparison communities there, but still kind of within the range of what you're seeing in various municipalities in the area. So you take kind of the, the total number of in-commuters, you apply that 5% capture rate to get the number of workers, and then you adjust it so that you're counting the fact that some workers, some households have multiple workers, and that's how you get to the 1,200. Okay.
One quick little tidbit. When I first started working here, I believe the commuter rate was about 80%, and it's up to 82% now. So it's actually, it's gone up.
Some
There's no
people
place
like,
to live.
What's that?
There's no place to live.
And is there anything we can glean from the spread there? So like Ledyard has a significantly higher share than Groton, and I think it's got a lower cost of living, even though it's right next door.
yeah, it's a different community.
It's a different community, absolutely.
I mean, some people want that lifestyle. I'm surprised by communities which are right next to us, how they have a very distinct, town get-togethers and all that sort of thing, neighborhoods. It's
And-
quite interesting, I think.
And just kind of anecdotally, again, I don't have a map memorized, but I do know a lot of folks who commute from Colchester, like a very significant amount who work at EB and commute in from Colchester and kind of the surrounding little towns. I'm wondering just how much is not getting captured because we're not going far enough out. People are willing to drive longer in order to live in a more affordable place.
And we do have like commuter maps indicating where the, population centers are, where people are coming from. Those are things that we've certainly looked at, whether in our 2015, 16 market study or market analysis, and then with these housing studies. So we have looked at a lot of these reports, and I mean, we keep doing studies and looking and capturing data, but at some point we have, it's all telling us a very similar story. Can we argue about maybe 10% of some of this, give or take? But at the end of the day, there's some issues that are clearly presenting themselves. And it's not just us, it's also surrounding communities. A number of us all live in different communities, and we hear the same stories from their planning boards, their planning commissions, town council. This is a similar story throughout this region.
Could you just look at it and think people don't want to live in the town that they work in? I mean, every single town seems like 20% of, or 80% of the.
And sometimes it's splitting the difference, right? If spouses live in
Yeah,
different places.
yeah, okay,
Right?
all right.
Yeah.
I mean, I
That
don't-
could explain some of it. At
Yes, I
least.
mean, I kind of think that maybe sometimes it's nice to be able to like end the day and go somewhere else.
And some people feel that way, but it also comes to availability. And, we look at certain neighborhoods and people that, whether they want to age in place, are they in the right sized home for the place that they're in? We can get into.
Yeah, no. I
deeper
just
discussions,
look at it and
yeah.
I think like, I look at almost looks like every town has the same problem that we have, which is a lot of people commuting to their town to work.
Yeah,
It's
but I
just-
think
it's a
Rex
different-
had a good point
Yeah.
with the fact that, there are couples and they work in two different places. I mean,
Yeah.
my daughter's in that situation
Yeah.
and, he's going this way and she's going this way. So where are they looking? Not in Groton.
I guess that kind of like Michael's question leads me to this one is this a problem to solve? If every community is experiencing something similar with commuter rates, because that's a pushback we get a lot, right? Is who says we actually want that many new units or that many new people? Who says it?
We do it right, we have an opportunity.
Endless growth there's always an opportunity for endless growth,
Yes.
right?
So when I was saying, yes, we have a high commuter rate, but when I was talking about the problem, I was talking about the problem of not enough housing. Not everybody has an 82% commuter rate. Yeah, there are high commuter rates in a lot of different places. Here we have a lot of jobs, so maybe that commuter rate is a little skewed one way or the other. But every community around us, when you start looking at them, they all have housing shortages. It's
Yep.
it's a New England problem. There's problems nationally. Just start, Googling news articles anywhere. You'll see a reoccurring issue with housing shortages, the right sized housing for the populations. It's everywhere. So it doesn't, some of it, those are solvable problems. But again, what level of it you want to address. So again, so we only have 35 minutes left and we're not even through the 2021 studies.
Whoops.
So go on, Tom.
All right, we'll keep going. All right, next group is new workers in the region. So these are workers from indirect jobs. So what that means is new jobs that would be created locally due to the economic or employment multiplier effect. So as EB adds jobs, those new people that work and live in the area are going to, shop at stores and buy groceries and need healthcare, and EB is going to purchase some from local suppliers and so forth. So as a result of those net new EB jobs of about 2,000 jobs, another 1,400 indirect jobs would be estimated based on the employment multiplier for that EB industry specific to the region. So get another 1,400 indirect jobs out of it. We make an assumption about how that translates to households and the percent that would be net new to the region. That gets us down to net new households to the region, and then Groton's kind of fair share capture of that. So specifically for that indirect employment, up to 150 jobs in that attainable capture rate, that 30% capture rate. The 300 units that was shown on the initial chart includes those indirect jobs plus Navy households who at the time there were an estimated 600 Navy sailors and families that were relocating to the area. So a portion of those were assumed to be creating housing demand. And then the fact that Beacon Point, which is the military housing at that time, was not restricted to military only. It was going to become military only, so that creates some displacement demand. So all of those impacts together, about 300 units. All right. And this is kind of the summary chart here again for the 2021 study. In addition to the groupings that we already talked about, this factors into the obsolete units, as well as baseline demographic trends. Based on the data that we had back in 2021, it was assumed that the number of households was actually declining locally and regionally. And so that was kind of a negative 280 that these other numbers were layered on top of. So that was kind of all of these factors, all of this kind of new activity in the region kind of neutralized that existing declining trend and then some. All right. So that is the 2021 study assumptions. We'll just pause here if we have any more questions on that before we move to 23.
I'll just ask mine in the 2023 because I have some questions. Let's see how this shakes out first, right?
Okay. All right. So now we're into the 2023 study. Overall, the number for the 2023 study was 6,450 units. So now we're talking about specifically the electric boat workers component of that. The demand potential from electric boat went up from 1910 to 2679. So similar methodology here. In fact, the same methodology. What changed is EB's projection. So instead of 2,000 new jobs, the outlook had grown to about 2,500 net new jobs by 2030 in the Southeast Connecticut region. And then the number of hires needed went from 15,000 up to 20,000. And again, this factors in that some of those workers are retiring, some of them are staying in the region, some are freeing up homes that new workers could move into, the need to kind of backfill other jobs in the area, and all of those same assumptions as the 2021 study. And so that bumped up the EB specific number a bit. I'll keep going. Rental upgraders here, same methodology again, just the kind of number of renters increased, the number of renters overall increased, and so that kind of demand pool increased as well. Slight increase there. Incoming commuters, this stayed constant. There was just very slight change, so you just called it kind of even in terms of kind of that rate of incommuting. Stayed pretty steady over that 2-year period, and so same kind of demand potential of incoming commuters. New workers, same assumptions again. More EB workers means more indirect employment. So this went up slightly from 300 to 320. And then baseline demographic trends, the projected decline of households shrank a lot from the prior study to a projection of only a 16 household decline. So kind of the baseline trend was just assuming flat, essentially flat. So that kind of larger declining trend really begins to reverse here. A lot of kind of the new households that had been moving in weren't really being picked up in the data yet. So we still kind of had that baseline data that's, you know, a little bit, you know, a year or two old. So it wasn't really capturing the fact that of all the EB activity yet. The unit replacement demand, this went up, I mentioned before, to 545. An oversight in the first study pulled the number for only a 5-year period. So the 545 is a 10-year period. It's not that the number of obsolete units or at risk of obsolete units spiked considerably. It's just bringing it over that corrected 10-year period. So again, market potential for 6,450 units in town, increase of 1,190 units from the previous study. About 2/3 of that increase was driven by EB and their latest hiring expectations that they shared with us, but all sources either grew or remained constant.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say to all this is that I always like to have two numbers when you're thinking about, you know, big project, big plans like this. You really need what you expect. I mean, what's probably going to happen. And then potential is a great one to have for planning too. Because I would measure what we've been doing against what we expect to have happen. You know, are we even keeping up with that? And then if we can, then you can start talking about the potential if you make that one.
Yep, yeah, that's a fair point.
So if I could just ask a question too. So just in business, I'm very used to the TAM, SAM, and SOM, which I'm sure, Tom, you know, as far as when you're identifying business potential. So this housing market potential, is that your TAM or your SAM?
I gotta say I'm not familiar with those
Oh,
terms.
sorry. So it's usually a business potential, which is total available market, serviceable, available market or addressable market. And then the SOM is the, what is the SOM? It's the, it's a position of, oh, just wrote it down too. So whatever. Oh, it's in a prior page. And the SOM is what we really go after. This is what we can truly capture. Sorry.
So I think, you know, the answer to that is we're not looking to go after the entire regional need.
Obtainable market.
You know, we're
The
looking
obtainable
at
market.
what is a reasonable number for Groton. And again, we said this a little bit at the last meeting. I want to stress this again. This is a great number for planning purposes to be aware of what that potential demand is over the next 10 years. You, as the decision makers about what happens for zoning now and in the future, our plan of conservation and development for now and in the future, and then working with the community, the things that we hear, the things that we get from surveys, from the people that do or don't show up, how do you then want to take this data and think about how can we have the best Groton to serve the needs of the people here?
Yeah,
So,
just
Finish that, sorry.
oh, sure.
So sorry, for the 6450, is that our obtainable market, we believe? We can obtain what we want with those 6,000 units?
So.
I mean, kind of a subjective question, right? I mean, it's, what is it that what is the goal? That's not my job to tell you what the goal is, but the 6450 is kind of if the goal was set, that 6450 should be within the realm of what is attainable.
Okay.
I don't know if that's really true.
Well, the numbers don't lie. If we believe the number methodology, I've done this 1,000 times ad nauseum. The numbers don't lie. But it's really important if that's the obtainable number. We believe that's the attainable.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's why I have
okay.
problems with the assumptions.
Okay.
And those are the numbers,
So you have a
Let's say
problem with the
something.
methodology or the assumptions?
some of the assumptions, I
Okay.
just think they could be
That's fair.
softened a bit.
But to your point, Sue, if we're talking about 64 or 52, whatever it is, over 10 years, 560 units per year, 560 dwelling places to live. And, we just approved how many? I mean, couple.
1,000, but it took quite a while to do.
But
And they haven't been built.
true.
And we
But
haven't built
also
them.
Not knocking down our door. I mean,
That's right.
we've approved almost every
That's
unit
right.
that has come to our door.
They are knocking down our door.
Okay.
We get calls and inquiries from developers all the time. They are looking for land here.
Mhm.
Some of it is what's available. Somebody had said well, why are we building all these apartments? Well, that's what our zoning allows right now. If you're looking for smaller scale things, there's a lot, 20 units or less, or that smaller mid-rise type of development. A lot of that isn't quite allowed within our zoning right now. If that's the scale of things we want to start seeing, that's what we're going to get into in that missing middle housing project. Again, future discussions, because we have 23 minutes to continue getting through this.
And I think the missing middle housing will integrate a lot of the concerns that you've had in terms of different scenarios, different things like that,
Yeah.
right? We've tried to be very thorough about.
Can I say something about just not worrying about the specifics too much? Because I still keep looking, for instance, about the rental upgrades. All these other things add people, rental upgrades adds no people, which means that I'm looking at it and saying, you know what? I think you've double counted the 1,900 people that are moving because they move out into a new unit, and now that's 1,900 units that are empty. One is people, one is apartments, and it doesn't matter. Well, I say that because if it's 6,000, we say 6,000, but it's really only 4,000. It was all we could do to get 1,000 new apartments. So if the goal is 4,000 or 3,000 or 5,000, it's big round numbers, and that's all we care about. We only care about the big round numbers. If it's more than
40 years though.
over 10 years, but if it's, well, but we can look at this in another 3 or 4 years and see how it's going. So if
40 a year, that's what we have to.
640 a year, so
Well,
good luck
Minus
getting
what
there.
is Double County saying.
But I think his point is, even if you said, all right, well, Sue had said, well, I don't know if I agree with some of these assumptions. Even if you reduced it by 25%, it's still a humongous
I
number.
agree with you 100%.
And that, I think that's the key takeaway
Right.
here. And, we worked with Tom and his team on this to try to look at the best assumptions available on this and giving you the best information. But at some point in time, we're going to stop studying it and say, all right, what are the solutions? Because we know that there's a problem with availability for housing. And as we'll see with the 2025 report, yeah, I'm sure some of the numbers are going to change, but we'll also get a good picture on the regional. And that's, I expect, is also going to be eye-opening.
I would say that if it's, the last couple of years, we managed to pull off 1,000 units, great. As long as this number ends up being over 2,000, then we're good for a few years. Trying to approve everything we can.
And again, it's approval, but it's also those units coming online.
Absolutely right. That's what I'm saying.
It's magical still. No, I understand what you're saying. You're setting the groundwork for those approvals to happen, which sets the groundwork for the units to happen.
Right.
By the way, is 184 stalled? The one across the street from where Shetucket used to be.
It's moving,
Yeah.
but they are working on plans. They haven't submitted building permit plan, and that's the thing.
State right
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
on access.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely moving forward now.
But again, even once I'm expecting a building permit application for that sometime early 2026.
Mhm.
Then we're talking 18 to 24 months for construction.
Mhm.
So all of these, once you approve it, there are other approvals from the state they need, which might take 6 to 9 months. Then they gotta
Mhm.
design the building plans, which they're not gonna do until they have all their approvals in place. Those might take 6 months. And then it's an 18 to 24. So from the time you approve it, it's probably 3+ years
Mhm.
till those are occupied. So like, yeah, anyway.
Just one final related question, Tom, for more than one person living in an apartment or a house that works at EB. How is that addressed?
Yeah, so in the assumptions for that, I believe we assumed 1.1 EB workers per household. I think that was the number. So it was
10%
assumed that in
or
some cases
in
there
the
would be
stock market.
multiple EB workers per household.
And though, 'cause I imagine the same thing, right? Like you probably have an outsized amount of EB workers living together. Even though that might be the case, the household size in Groton is still really low and decreasing. So they're not necessarily offsetting that median household size throughout the entire town, which is really all that we can do with the kind of data assumptions, right? We don't
Yeah,
have-
no, as long as it's
Yeah.
somehow, in there,
Yeah.
because I know it does exist. I mean, I knew many couples
Yeah.
that both worked at EB.
I looked a lot
Yeah.
at the data trying to find if there was any kind of for you.
Okay.
All right, Tom?
Moving on.
Okay. Right, so that's kind of the end of the 21-23 studies. The next piece, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna go a little quicker. And yeah, I guess I guess I don't think we have a lot of time for questions. I'll try to get through this as fast as I can, and then maybe we'll have a couple minutes for questions. So household growth up, but population decreasing. Eric talked about this last time. I think you're all familiar with this data already, but since 2010, there's been a 5.7% decrease in the population of Groton. Meanwhile, there's been a 4.1% growth in households. And since 1990, which was kind of the peak of population, we're down about 16% population wise, but up, over 10% household wise. So this is just driving home the point that just because population's declining, that does not mean that housing unit demand is declining. In fact, it's the opposite.
But we've only averaged 43 households per year over the last 15 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a quick side note, this presentation will be available on our website and,
Right, and the full presentation of this particular project will be on the 9th.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. More meetings.
Okay, so now we're looking at growth in households by household size. This is showing that the share and number of small households, being single person or 2-person households, is increasing over a 10-year period, while the larger household sizes are decreasing over that 10-year period. So this is speaking to kind of the shifting demand for types of housing that better align with these growing segments. Okay, so this is kind of an important trend I want to highlight here. So in the 21 and 23 studies, we assumed that a portion of the jobs vacated by EB hires would need to be backfilled by new residents moving into the region, that new EB jobs would add net new workers on top of the regional job base, assuming kind of full recovery from the pandemic. The reality has been a bit different in that by 2025, the total number of jobs in the region is actually below where it was in 2018, which was kind of the pre-pandemic peak. So employment peaked at around 176,000 jobs in 2018. By 2025, according to most recent estimates, it had fallen to about 173,000. So we're down about 3,100 jobs from that peak. Obviously, a lot more were lost during 2020. Then the recovery has been largely successful, but it's not full recovery in the region. The story is different for Groton because of electric boat. So whereas regionally the job counts are down, in Groton the total jobs are up by about 1,800 jobs, so about a 4% increase. So that means that Groton's accounting for a larger share of jobs in the region that has an employment base that has not reached its pre-pandemic peak. So this tells us that kind of the new EB jobs have mostly offset losses elsewhere in the regional economy in other sectors. And it also means that instead of having to import large numbers of new workers, much of the hiring has been local workers, which was told to us by EB as when we talked to them recently. Most of kind of the hiring has been more local and less out of region as they had initially anticipated. And that kind of makes sense just based on the fact that, there are folks, the total jobs available in the region are down. And so EB has found it easier to find people that are, looking for a job locally. A little bit more on EB. So continues to be kind of the single biggest driver economic growth in Groton and the region. Just some stats here, kind of since 2019, Groton's added 1,600 jobs, 3,000 jobs in ship and boat building, which means that's kind of neutralized some of the losses in other sectors. And then this has just been the hiring trajectory by year for electric boat. This is all locations on the chart on the right. So this includes Rhode Island. And so it's slowed down. They still plan to hire or reach the kind of peak employment levels as before. That hasn't declined at all, which is their long-term goal is to reach 30,000 workers by the early 2030s, with 60% of that in southeastern Connecticut. But hiring has slowed down because of supply chain issues. So the kind of demand resulting from EB is going to be kind of pushed a bit later. About 70% of recent hires have been tradespeople, and though in the Groton area, and those hires tend to be the ones that are easier to source locally. 30% are professionals. They are more likely to be recruited from outside the region. But EB expects that future hiring is going to transition more toward professionals. And so that will mean more folks likely being hired from outside the region. And it also means that's also more likely to happen as the local labor pool does get more constrained, assuming that, the current upward trajectory of the employment base in the region does continue to grow and potentially surpass that kind of pre-pandemic peak. And then with EB kind of layered on top as well.
So just quickly, the values on the left in those blue boxes, those are or are not including Quonset Point?
These on the left are specific to the town of Groton.
Okay.
So that's total. The 1,600 is total jobs across all industries in Groton, and the 3,000 is ship and boat building industry in Groton.
Okay, no, that's good. Do we have the data on those jobs that are lost and not getting replaced? Like the net is good that it's increased, but you said that it's kind of overcompensated for by ship and boat building. If we're looking at our POCD at wanting to diversify our economic base, I think it's good to know where we lost jobs in the pandemic and never got them back.
Yep. Yeah, that will all be in the full report. I think a lot of that was, wouldn't say most of it, some of it was driven by the casinos, downsizing workers. Overall, I know that 7 out of 20 sectors have more jobs today and 13 out of 20 have fewer. So that those losses were spread over a large number of sectors.
Yeah, so it include Pfizer, right? I was gonna say Pfizer had a bunch of layoffs, and then I know that they're making upgrades to their campus now. So maybe that's something that'll come back.
But not that big, huh? Not that big, huh?
Yeah, do we just want to hit the upcoming slides are all about costs, housing costs? I just want to make sure we can hit those in time.
Keep us on
Yep.
task, Bryce.
All right, we'll go through these quickly. So here we're talking about owner housing costs. I know similar data was presented by Eric. Just to clarify here, in this particular chart, these values are not adjusted for inflation. It's showing that the median household income in town increased 37% over the 10-year period from 2013 to 2023. The median home sale price increased by 71%, and the mortgage payment on a newly purchased median home more than doubled to 134%, and most of that growth happened just in the years after 2021, the combination of a spike in interest rates and home prices together. So while that mortgage payment figure doesn't impact folks that already had a mortgage and are in their homes, it substantially impacts folks that are trying to, especially first-time home buyers that are trying to get into the market. So when we compare the kind of owner affordability gap, the median sales price of a single family home in 2024 was $403,000. In order to afford that, a household would need to make $150,000. That assumes a 10% down payment, a 6.7% mortgage rate. And that is well above the median Groton household income of $83,000. So quite a large gap there. Even for condos, $100,000 would be needed for a household income, still considerably above the 84,000 median value. Renter, similar story here. Median renter income has increased 25%. Whereas median gross rent has increased by 33%. These are not adjusted for inflation. In an inflation adjusted terms, median renter income actually declined very slightly by 0.1%. So call it flat. So you're seeing almost no growth in median renter income in real terms, whereas rents continue to rise. And so kind of where that affordability gap began to appear was around 2018, where prior to that, the median renter could afford the median rent. Since 2018, that has not been the case. Groton continues to be a net importer of workers. We've talked about the stat a lot tonight. And so kind of, again, those are a large number of folks that potentially could live in Groton or would desire to live in Groton if there were opportunities. Those could be teachers or healthcare staff or service employees or whoever it might be. Certainly not everyone wants to live in Groton, but I think it's safe to think that some portion of those folks would live here if the right housing opportunities were available. Speaking to permitting activity, we spoke about this a bit just before. Kind of, as you all know, big increase in permitting over 23-24 period, 570 new housing units since 2021. So that's a big break kind of from the past trend. Shows that developers are responding to demand where they see opportunity. And it kind of tells us when zoning and market demand and financing all line up, we can see new housing happen and respond to that need. And then in terms of projects actually having been built, since 2020, 4 multifamily projects, 570 multifamily units built in town. Plans for over 1270 other units have been approved, as you all know. But just wanted to kind of highlight here, you know, these are all multifamily rental projects. They will appeal to some portion of the demand in the town, but not all. And so kind of broadening the range of housing types that do get approved and get built is certainly an opportunity and a need for many folks in town that are looking for options that align with their demand. So I will leave it at that. I guess we have 5 minutes left for any final questions.
So a couple anomalies we have in Groton when we talk about obsolete is that we have a extremely high percentage of mobile home percentage. Does that affect your that particular figure as far as what was that called? Or you substitute out houses because they fall apart?
Obsolete housing.
Obsolete houses. So that figure is based on averages for replacement of housing by owners and by renters by level of income. So it's kind of those figures are based on national averages for what how likely a family of a certain income level's home would be to become obsolete over the period. So it's not really, it doesn't matter what, from those stats at least, it doesn't matter what the type of housing is. It's based on the income of the occupant.
Got it. And so my second question is specific to Connecticut. We have something called an 830G. It's affordable housing, workaround, et cetera. And because we are in a favorable position, in your opinion, just what you've looked at thus far, I know that this is just a subjective opinion for the moment. Does that affect us in a negative fashion whereby maybe we're not attracting as many developers because we don't we don't have to embrace an 830G development?
I mean, I guess I don't know enough of the perception of Groton by developers. If there are sites available and that are zoned for multifamily, I don't think that 830G would, impact you, but it may be that that is not the case. That, if a developer came in today, I don't know, are there sites available where they could build, 50 or 100 units? I don't know the answer to that.
And Kevin, most of the larger multifamily projects that we see in the region outside of Groton typically have an affordability component and typically are done through 830G, right? So they're achieving a level of density that they might not otherwise be able to get in those respective towns, whereas here they are not needing to necessarily bypass zoning or approvals, and they're able to achieve that density without that affordability component, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also I think
It does.
we have been trying to stay ahead of the curve. One, we don't have the threat of the 830G. So that's helpful that people can't just bypass our zoning, but at the same time, we have to kind of take that step back and say, all right, what segment of the population are we not meeting the housing needs for?
Yes, and that's where it comes down to.
And that's what it comes down to. And that's why we're trying to do some of this,
Yeah.
because we recognize there's a need. So we, and if you're not hearing it, if we're not bringing it to your attention, doing these types of studies, then how do you know? Because you're not being forced, your hand isn't being forced by an 830G.
We're not a bullseye, but maybe we want to be a bullseye unless we accomplish that in another manner. That's the only point.
But I mean, with that said, I said it before, we have a lot of developers that reach out to us that are looking for available sites, that are looking for areas where they can do more creative things with zoning, but what is or isn't allowed by our zoning right now dictates the development that we get, or that the development that we don't get. If we want different styles and types of development, we have to change the zoning to get what it is we do want. Sure.
Is there something particular that developers keep asking for that we have to keep saying, no, we don't do that, or can't do that, or not here?
I really think it's land availability.
Just
you
in
know,
general?
It just really is. You know, 830G would allow multi-units in single family zones, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't have to pay attention to the zoning. So I think in other towns, that's why they may be getting more projects here because we're not 830G, you know, it's the commercial zones and it's the RM. And the industrial now, but it's the land. It's the
And
land
maybe we change
development.
that. That's
Yeah,
the issue.
exactly.
I think we just did.
We did.
Yeah,
We did in one area, right?
Yeah,
We did.
and any action on that? I mean, it seems like
Some
we had a
discussion with
developer.
some discussions with the owner about how he is progressing with folks who are talking. So sure.
And that kind of missing piece that we still have, hence the missing middle housing study that we're going to be diving into soon, is that we allow the large range of multifamily, but the smaller scale stuff
That's right.
is categorized as at the same type and scale per our zoning as the big stuff.
It's only allowed the same zones that the big stuff is.
Right, exactly.
So-
You can't compete there. That's what we
That-
found
that's
to
right.
date.
And that's why we're not seeing it. So if we want to see some of that, and there's ways of doing it that it can, match and fit in traditional neighborhoods at the right scale. But that's what we'll be dealing with over the course of the next year.
And that, and Tom, can you go
Yeah,
to the
that's what
slide?
I'm saying.
Yep.
This is not a planning and zoning commission project, okay, it's
Right.
not like the P O C D.
Right.
However, we do have the missing middle project, and these are dates that
Mm-hmm.
you should pay attention to.
Is there a date on the walking tour?
Not yet.
Not as of yet. I've got some.
Later.
Some
Yeah.
targets.
TBD.
I got some targets. I've got one of the tours together in my head right now. I gotta work with the consultants. But the real target date is at October 9th, right? That's gonna be that public meeting regarding these housing projections. And again, Tom and his team have done a really, really good job at expanding what these previous studies have done and what they've looked at. And really getting ahead of a lot of the concerns, I think that a lot of people had about previous studies at the same time.
So where are we with the 2025?
October 9th.
That
they're-
is the
they're-
20
Yep,
Yeah.
And I'll be putting that right up on the website
Yeah.
as soon as the 9th hits.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, I mean, looking at 4-year-old data is okay and everything like that, and I understand it sets trends, but jump right to the meat and
Meat.
This
potatoes.
will be down at Thrive. It is a public presentation, so you're not gonna see any agendas or anything, so just make a note of it. This-
Would love for you all to attend. We'll video it. Can't remember. Right now I have a hold on my calendar from 4:30 to 8, but we'll get the time to all of you. Again, the questions that some of you have.
5:30 to 7:30, John.
Thank you. 5:30 to 7:30. Excellent.
At
Or-
Thrive 55.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. What were the assumptions in the 2021 study, the 23 study? So, 4-year-old data, 2-year-old data. We want to update this. At some point, we're not going to be able to keep updating these every couple of years, but it's okay. We can see a trend where things are going. And go. from
Did
there.
we have Tom only to 6:30? Is that why it was ending at 6:30?
It is, and we have a public hearing that starts at 7.
Right, so we have time to talk ourselves, or can we do that within?
Not,
No,
not
never
in the
mind.
meeting,
Yeah.
no.
Can I ask one last
Just ask
question, Bryce?
Yeah, so.
I'd like to ask a question.
Just
You
of,
Just get a tight
Bryce,
timeframe, but.
Yeah.
on this,
Yeah.
any other neighborhoods besides Mystic that you're going to
Yes.
do this? Okay.
Yep, I am planning out the Paquonic Bridge one. It's tricky, right? Because there's great examples in the city, but this project's not really, considering the city in that way. So it's gonna be Mystic and Paquonic Bridge most likely, because that's where we have the plethora of housing types that we can also walk around to in a reasonable fashion, right? And not have to trek a mile here and a mile over there, uphill, anything like that. So, yep.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Tom. That was
Yeah.
most
Can we
interesting.
not close this?
Okay.
Appreciate it. Well.
Yeah.
One more question?
Okay, one more
And
question.
then we'll have a
So
motion
the
to-
issue is, I'm just saying, I'm bringing it to the business standpoint, like total available market, addressable market. So what Tom did, in my opinion, from a methodology, was did a great job on that. So he showed us the total available and the addressable market for Groton. One of those numbers is the 6250, right? But the real
450.
6450, but the real issue is what's our obtainable housing number that we're gonna shoot for the next 10 years? In my opinion, we didn't get there tonight because it matches the P O C D. And I think based on, as Hal said, we put 1,000 apartments on track. Well, that's only 333 if we're doing it, have done that over the last 3 years, which we haven't. The numbers were actually short of that. So the real issue is, what do we really what we obtain in Groton for the next 10 years? And that's the number, in my opinion, is the only number that counts. It's not the 6,400. That's probably a serve of the addressable market, right? Not total available. What can we obtain through our work together in Groton in 10 years?
Now,
And
what do you want to, what does the
Yeah.
community want to attain?
Yeah.
It's a long discussion.
And I
It
think
is, right?
part of the missing middle housing, again, not to bring it back to that every time, but there are build out scenarios, right? That will look at existing zoning, potential zoning, existing lots, all that kind of stuff, and we'll get to more of that
that
scenario
would be the sweet
base.
spot of Groton, in my opinion, which is great, because you needed the methodology to get there, so.
You want to do a motion to adjourn?
Motion
Motion to adjourn.
Second to adjourn.
Then I'll second it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay,
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
John, Deb,
Thanks, all of you.
Bryce, Sam. Very interesting.
Thanks for listening.
No, thanks for letting us